Good evening and welcome to tonight's edition of Beyond the Politics, our examination of the events happening right here in the Quinte region and the people who work so hard behind the scenes to make it all happen. I'm your regular host, Paul Martin, with me, my co-host, regular columnist for the Belleville Intelligencer, Kelly McCaw.
Thanks, Paul.
And our special guest this week, returning, having appeared once before with us in the fall, but now a show all your own, Councillor for Ward 1 in the city of Belleville, Kelly McCaw.
Good evening.
This process was very different from the last one, and we'll talk about that in a second. But this was very routine. It, of course, was sparked by Ryan Williams' resignation. We'll talk about that in a second. But what was it like going through it this time as opposed to the last time?
I think this time was much easier. I think there was much more consensus around the table as to the process at that time. Carol Feeney obviously ran in the last election, but she also became engaged in committee work, which is something that's recommended for people that wish to run for council, and she took the steps to do that. So for me, it was an easy decision in that regard.
Now, this, of course, comes on the heels of Ryan's resignation and, of course, the time before that. But let's talk a little bit more about Carol. So what do you know of Carol? How confident are you that Carol will be representing the people of the city of Belleville well?
So I don't know Carol very well, but I do know her a little bit through the last campaign. We had met, there had been a few functions that we had met at. She's well respected. She has some fairly deep ties in the arts community, and she's also had some experience on these committees, especially with some of our fellow council members. So I think she's going to be quite an asset.
So she's not a complete unknown then?
Absolutely not. No, a lot of people know her and they like her. I think she, from my perspective, is someone that can bring a lot to the table, that, you know, maybe some skill sets that we don't have now.
Now, are you happy the fact that she's a woman coming in, or does that matter?
For me, it's irrelevant. For some, you know, they feel that the representation of women on council should be reflective of the community, which is 52%. I don't disagree with the theory, but more so, from my opinion, you know, I want to see someone who's dedicated and qualified for the job, regardless of gender. I think that's, you know, the takeaway that I hope people get from this.
So let's skip forward. So then, will this be the process moving forward? Going to the last one, which is, of course, when our mutual friend Pat Culhane passed away last November, that was completely different than this process was. And at the end of that process, there seemed to be a general agreement among council that it would be next in line. So do you think that will be a standardized thing moving forward, or is there still room for discussion on issues of inclusion or representation?
I really hope that's not the situation. I'd like to see it go on a case-by-case basis. There are many reasons for or against doing it that way. Tradition can be good, but tradition can also be not good. So I hope we don't settle into a mindset that states we have to take the next in line, because we could really be missing out on opportunities. You know?
Moving forward, let's talk about one of the things that you brought in, which is term limits.
Yes.
And this sort of almost dovetails with this part of the conversation,
yes.
Because for there to be a place for new people, there have to be, in many cases, seats that are open. Because you've been the first to say that when people run as incumbents, that's a huge advantage. So you brought forward this motion, it was actually a notice of motion on term limits. Tell us about your thinking behind it and what it would have meant.
I've thought about term limits for a long time. And I don't necessarily just mean for municipal government. I mean all levels of government. Just have a look at the states and how many senators sit there, you know.
For 30 years?
Or more.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have your president who, 47 years in the Senate? Something like that. So, you know, if you want to change and you want renewal and you want things to be different, you need different people. And our community changes daily. You look at the real estate these days and the people moving in from other centers, you know, larger centers, the GTA. We need to change to be reflective of our demographic. And you can't do that with the same people sitting there, you know, for 16 years, 20 years, 25 years.
Okay, you have 9 on council, so you have 8 people that will be councillors. Are you suggesting a term limit of 2, so that would be 8 years, or are you saying 3,
I was generous
12?
and said 3.
So
I was
12?
generous and said 12 years. I think 12 years is long enough to get an agenda through. And as blunt as this may seem, if you can't get your agenda through in 12 years, it's time to move on. I strongly feel that. I feel that for myself, and I wouldn't have said it if I didn't intend to do that myself. I think it maybe troubled a few around council when I made those statements, but the reality is, why are we here? Are we here for ourselves, or are we here for our community? If we're here for our community the way we're supposed to be, then we need change. We can't have the same people sitting there.
Do you think the voters would agree with you that the term limit should be brought up, or?
You know, that's certainly a topic for discussion, but what I have found...
Well, you're raising the issue.
I know. Well, and I'd love to hear. I'd love to hear feedback on that. But the reality is, and I'll just use the parallel between my running in 2014 and 2018, because I can only speak for myself. 2014, I was unknown. I knew no one. I campaigned hard. I almost single-handedly funded my whole campaign. I did have donations, but from close friends and family. So I basically self-funded that campaign for the most part and worked very hard. As I moved forward, and the decisions you make and the actions you make, then your next term is a little bit easier. Then it's a lot easier to go out and have people and groups want to give you money. They want to give you money because they want a certain decision that works for them. So in a sense, that concerns me, because I would never want to accept a donation for a campaign with an expectation that I'm going to vote a certain way, because that's not really the way it should be. So just the fact you've been there, you've made decisions, you've made a name for yourself, you're already putting yourself ahead of someone who's trying to start out. So,
lastly, for this segment, I want to talk about the cause close to your heart, which is the Humane Society.
Yes.
We mentioned the late Pat Culhane at the beginning of the show. She was a driving force behind the current program of putting up a brand new building. That's a huge undertaking, something that has been desperately needed for so long. Talk about your involvement with the Humane Society and then the drive that's currently underway.
So Pat brought me into the Humane Society, I'm going to say 5 years ago. Brought me in. I really wanted to be on it, and she helped me in the door. So I got in the door, and obviously for those who haven't been to the Humane Society on Avonlow Road, I would say don't even go, because, unless you want to adopt an animal, because it
the
really
building's
is
awful.
The building, it's a sad state, and it's a sad place to go. Mm-hmm. We do what we can with what we have to work with, but the reality is, and many people don't understand, the Quinte Humane Society receives no federal funding, no municipal, well, up until this time, no municipal funding, and no provincial funding. It wasn't until Pat and myself got involved where we, tried to work and see if we could somehow get municipalities engaged in helping our Quinte Humane Society. We were lucky enough that Quinte West jumped on board, City of Belleville jumped on board, gave us some money, gave us some support in kind, things like that. Last year, 2020, our building, it became very evident it isn't going to last. I mean, it is not going to last. We are in I would say, a desperate situation. We had raised a fair bit of money, but these things cost a lot of money. And, they're regulated as to how you build these buildings. You don't just slap up 4 walls and away you go. You have to follow regulations like you would for a hospital. So it became apparent that we would not be able to break ground this year in our current state from our current donations. We had some, but not near enough. The level of desperation, we started to seek out properties that maybe already existed that we could buy and retrofit. We did that quietly because we ran out of options. When that didn't seem to work out, we decided to make a plea to the municipalities, and the Mayor of Belleville had a quiet meeting with the Mayor of Quinte West, and together they came up with a solution to help the Quinte Humane Society, whereby they have lent, each municipality has lent $1 million to the organization, which has brought us up enough to do our basic bare bones first phase of a Quinte Humane Society. So we're going to be breaking ground tonight. I'm not at the meeting, but they're actually introducing.
And whereabouts will the new building be?
The new building will be on Walbridge-Soilus Road. It will be south of the tracks, right next to the CAA building. We've had that property for a few years. Plans are being unveiled. For those who don't know, we have contracted Task Force Engineering to build the structure. We're going to be working on it right away. And
So shovels in the ground when approximately?
very soon, I would say in a couple of months, I'm hopeful.
So
A couple of
June
months.
maybe the building will get
Hopefully,
started?
we're going to get started, yeah.
Now the building, you had a plan for a certain type of building and it costs a lot of money, as you said.
did.
And has the building changed, the dimensions of the building changed at all, or?
So initially, it was right around the time I got there, before I got there, they had contracted an architect to design a building, which was much grander scale, much more expensive. So before Pat passed away, we could see the writing on the wall. We knew that this building was not going to make it. She had been a strong advocate to say, we need to pare this back. We need to scale it back. We need to think outside the box. Luckily, her nephew is also a part of the Quinte Humane Society, and that's just what he does. So his name is Al Bunnett, and he's been a pivotal part in helping us shape this building and bring it within a budget that we can handle and we can do this year.
Okay. Well, thank you. You've been watching Beyond the Politics with Kelly McCaw.